So in this video, we are going to play with objects. And since this is an exercise video, I want to remind you that you can find all the code of this course in GitHub /Michelenucci /programming basics. And the exercises are inside the exercise folder, and in this case, in the objects folder, and there you can find also the solutions. So as a first exercise, I would like you to write a function here that takes an array, and without modifying the array, because remember array are still objects, therefore are passed by reference. So I don't want you to modify this array, since modifying this array will modify also the array outside the function. So I want you to write the function so that it takes an array and then returns a new array which has the elements inverted. So in the case of this array, as an example, I would expect the returned array to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and still this array to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So since we are going to construct an entire new array, since we don't want to modify this array, an operation you may need is the push operation. And the push operation, as you can read here, modifies the array, but it does not return an array, rather it returns a number, and that number corresponds to the length of the resulting array. And we can see the result of pushing a new value to an array only after the operation of adding the new value as completed. And in fact, if I console log an array which was previously empty, and then I pushed a number as a value, and then if I console log, I get printed out the array with the value. So with this operation in mind, you should be able now to write such a function. So please pause the video so that you can try to implement the solution yourself. So I've assumed you have paused the video and tried to solve the exercise yourself. So I'm going to show you my solution. And my solution really was just a loop that goes through the array, but starting from the end. In fact, in order to do so, I have a variable that starts from 1, and we'll see why 1, and goes increasing until it reaches the length of the array I passed to the function. And actually this variable starts from 1, since I want to use this variable in order to subtract it from the length of the array. And since we do not modify the array we got, we are sure that this value is always the same. And starting from 1, I am able to get the last value on the first iteration. So the first element of the reversed array will be the last value of the initial array. So the last case in which this is true, this will evaluate to 0, which we know is the first element of the array. And this will also be the last element of the reversed array. And then we exit the loop, since I will be then greater than the length of the array, and so we return the constructed array. So if we run the program, we see that all the test cases are passed, so we can assume that the function was implemented correctly. As a second exercise, I would like you to implement again a function that takes an array and reverts it, but this time I don't want you to return anything. In fact, this function should return nothing, but should modify this array. And since, again, arrays are objects, so are passed by reference, each time we modify an array, also inside a function, we are modifying the array itself. And I also don't want you to declare any variable, but you are allowed to use this function that I defined, which I call swap in array. and takes an array, a number, and another number. And these numbers are assumed to be indexes to use to access values. And what this function does is changing the position of the two values that finds at the given index. So since the function will act on this array, there is no need to return anything, since this array will be modified inside the function and also outside the function that holds it. So by using this function that swaps two elements of an array, you should be able to implement a function that can reverse an array without return anything, but the array itself is modified. So please now pause the video and try to solve this exercise yourself. So I assume you have paused the video and have tried to implement such a function. So I'm going to show you my solution. And in my solution, I just implemented again a for loop, but this time the for loop goes on for half the length of the array, and I call swap in array by passing the same array I got as input of the function as first argument. Then I pass the I, which is going through the first half of the array, and then I pass the length -1. So when this is 0, we know that we are accessing the last value. And then I subtract the I. So we are going through the array in the opposite direction, starting from the end. And as an example, in the first cycle, this function will take the first and the last element of an array and will change their position, and will go on until it reaches the center of the array. Now, in the case of an array of which the length is even, then the half of the length is an integer number and will point to, as in this case where we have 4 elements, the half of 4 is 2, and so will point to the very next element after the half of the array. And in the case of an array with a number of values which is odd, then as in this case where we have 5 values, the half of 5 is 2.5, and the loop will go on for 0, 1, 2. So we will also keep this one, but since we are also doing 4, 3, 2, we are actually swapping 2 with 2, so this will stay here. And if we run the program, we see that in fact this is reversed correctly. And for the last exercise, I would like you to implement a function that I call deepCopy, and this function could take anything as input and will return a new value that has the same properties and or is the same value of what we got here, and this returned value is supposed to be equal to the value we got. Now we assume that if we get an object here, it will not contain any function or things that are hard actually to get a copy of. And in order to implement such a function, a useful operation that you can do is by using the type of operator with any value. And in this case, you are interested in using it with arrays or object, and this should always return an object string as a result. And we will actually see this operator in the very next video, but for the moment you are only interested in checking if the result of this operation with a variable is in fact an object. And once you know to be operating with an object, you can distinguish if that value was an array or an object by using the array dot is array and the value you are interested in, and this function will return false for object and true for arrays. The last important operation that you may want to know is the object.keys function that, given an object, it returns an array which contains strings representing the property names of the object, or in the case of an array, it returns strings containing numbers, since we can access values of an array through number. So it's kind of like the property names of the values are the number. So given these three operation that you can do with object, you should now be able to implement a function that can copy entire values, and you can now try to implement this function by pausing the video. So I assume you have paused the video, therefore I'm going to show you my solution. So since we said that we are working with values that are not functions, I first checked that the value that has been passed is not an object. And if it is not an object, then we are sure that this value has been passed by value. So this is already a copy, and therefore we can immediately return the value we got since it is already a copy. Then from this moment on, we are sure to be working with object. So I first checked that the object that we got was an array, and if this was true, then I created a new array and I pushed inside each element of the array, and I actually wanted to be sure to be pushing a copy, since in the case we got an object or another array inside the array, then that would have been passed by reference, and that would have not resolved the exercise. So I am making a deep copy of whatever value we have, and then pushing this copy, which is an entire new value, inside the new array. And once we went through every possible value of the array, in this case we return the freshly created array. If instead this evaluated to false, then we are sure that we are working with an object. Therefore, I first copied all the properties of the object we got, and then I used the object keys with that object as input in order to get an array that I store in the keys variable. And then I go through each key and I assign to each property that I have created before a deep copy of the initial value, so that we are sure that if any value of a property was an object, that is also copied and not passed by reference. And once we finish, I just return the new object. So if we run the program with this test, we see that all the possible values were copied correctly. So I hope this video was useful to you, and I hope also you are able to solve all the exercises. Starting from the very next video, we are going to talk of types. So please remember to like the video and to subscribe to the channel so that you can keep learning with me. And in any case, thank you for your time, and I will see you in another video. Bye bye.